Hey guys, it's Siobhan with To Kitty and Beyond. Welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about the ego. So what is the ego? What can it do for us when it's working properly? And what does it do when it's not working properly? How do we fix that or resolve some of those issues and get the ego working for us? So what is the ego? Well, the ego is a program that is created by us. So it's essentially a function of the mind, and there are many different functions of the mind. We have the subconscious mind, we have the conscious mind, we have the ego, we have the id, we have the superego, as according to Freudian psychology. There's all of these different layers and aspects of the mind as we deem it. But there's also the spiritual aspects of the mind, the subconscious, and the ego. And when we talk about the ego in the spiritual community, oftentimes it's with a negative connotation. We tend to think that the ego is something that limits us, that gets in our way, or that is related to ego inflation or negative ego, such as narcissism and that type of thing. But the ego in and of itself is inherently neutral, and it's meant to be a function or a mechanism that we can work with to embody and experience ourself. So what the ego actually does is creates a barrier of separation. We can call this the veil if we like. There's lots of different terminology that we can apply, but the way that I like to think about it is that the ego is simply what allows us to exist as ourself. It helps us to understand our personality. And so in a sense, the ego is what creates separation. And we see that in the negative aspects as well. We do see that the ego can create too much separation, where we become aggressive towards perceived other selves because they are so separate from us that they are not like us at all, and so we judge them or we don't like them or whatever it may be. That's the more negative aspects of the ego. There are, again, two sides to everything as we live in a realm of duality. That's not to say that duality is all there is, because essentially when you get down to the grassroots of things, it's all one. There's the underlying unity, but everything has a spectrum of polarity, and so it can fall to either side within that realm of duality. So the ego can be both good and bad, but inherently, like I said, it's neutral. So how can we work with our ego instead of working against it? Because if you perceive your ego as something that you have to get rid of, or you buy into the idea of ego death, then you're really just disempowering yourself. Because if you are pitting yourself against yourself, because your ego is you, it's an aspect of you, it's not all of you, but it is an aspect of you, and it's something that you have created. So if you're pushing against this aspect of yourself, something that you've created, and abdicating the responsibility for what it's doing or the programs that it's running, then you're disempowering yourself, and you're not going to make any progress in that respect. You can try to kill off your ego, but that's neglecting an aspect of yourself. So when I talk about programming the ego, I talk about this in the sense of the subconscious mind. So everything, all of the programs that your ego is running, everything from how you think about things, what you believe, what you invest your time and energy into, what actions you're taking on a daily basis, to how you respond to emotional triggers. This all comes down to subconscious programming, and the ego works off of that. It's a program itself. It's a mechanism. It's like a computer, and we've created the software through our subconscious mind. So to decode and reprogram the ego, we have to start at the root, at the source code, which lies within the subconscious mind. And in layman's terms, in the spiritual community, this is called shadow work. So this is what you do. You delve deep into the subconscious mind, into the shadow realms of yourself. You find these aspects of yourself that are oftentimes uncomfortable to look at, to deal with, to accept responsibility for. But in doing so, you are empowering yourself to create change. And the only way that you can create change is to make these things conscious. So only when we bring these things into our conscious mind, into our awareness, and we understand them, can we begin the process of transformation. So when we do this kind of deprogramming at a subconscious level, and this can look like anything for every different person. It's going to be different. It's very personal, and you don't have to go out and seek outside guidance for this. You can do this on your own. It may be a little bit more difficult when there are areas of resistance within yourself, because imagine it like this. There's something in your subconscious mind, perhaps it's a fear or a belief about yourself that's very negative. The ego will try to protect you from that by not showing that to you, by hiding it, by repressing it, by burying it down deeper, or by rationalizing it, which is in a sense hiding it in plain sight. And so you become so resistant to finding the truth behind it that you cannot change it. And this is where it becomes effective to seek outside, non-judgmental, unbiased, objective assistance in service of some way. So you can do this in various different ways. There's lots of different aspects of healing to look at here, and I talk about them in almost all of my videos. There's therapy, there's counseling, traditional psychology, any kind of psychoanalysis is fantastic. I love the science aspects of things, but I'm also here as a spiritual being, and I'm owning that. So I have branched into, as we talk about here on the channel, Reiki, tarot, quantum healing hypnosis therapy, and now I'm learning about the Akashic records and soul realignment as well. So there's so many different tools or avenues that you can employ to be able to bring about change within yourself, to push past these self-imposed barriers so that you can get down to the nitty-gritty of what it is that is there and how you can change that, to take action. So the ego in itself, again, it's not negative, but it will try to protect you as best it can, because the ego is about survival. The ego perceives itself as separate. The ego is what allows us to see ourselves as a separate entity. It's our personality. It's who we think we are. And so it will try to protect what it believes. So anything that we hold on to really vehemently will be defended by the ego, whether it's true or not true, right or wrong. The ego doesn't care about right or wrong or true or untrue. It really just gloms onto what it's programmed at. So if your ego is telling you one thing and your soul is telling you a different thing, you can be sure that the soul is the one that is authentic and trying to give you the most impartial, unbiased, and truthful perspective. The ego, and it's not that the ego is trying to mislead you or trick you in any way or lead you down a negative path. It's just doing what it's programmed at. So there's some level of you that believes those things. That's why it's so difficult for us to extricate ourselves from the ego mind, to move beyond that ego voice in our head and become the observer. And then from there, be able to discern and differentiate between which thoughts are ego, which thoughts are higher self, which thoughts are coming from somebody else entirely, because you can totally pick up on somebody else's brainwaves and energy signature, or what's coming from source, what are channeled messages, what are information from your environment. This is how you can start to compartmentalize and see things as different and yet all one. So again, we have paradox, and I always talk about paradox because the whole universe, to me, in my eyes, is founded on paradox. Everything is contradictory, and yet it is one thing. So it seems like everything's separate, but everything is one. And it goes in circles like that on into eternity. So the ego itself, like I said, is not bad. But it can be good because, again, like I was saying, it's there to protect you. It wants you to survive. It doesn't want to die. And it doesn't want you, your physical body, to die either. So it will try to protect you. And like I said, in some ways, this can create resistance or coping mechanisms or disassociation. This can also create cognitive dissonance when our beliefs or ideas of reality are challenged by new information. Your brain will quite literally go into fight or flight response because the ego is saying, no, that contradicts the programming that I have running at this time. And so it kind of short circuits the system. You go into defense mode, you shut down, or you fight, or you flight, whatever it may be, your reaction of choice. But it's not there to create problems. It is there to help us to live a life of reality in this existence, in this dimension, whether third or fourth. So here's another thing. The ego itself exists at third dimension. So when people only identify with their ego, they're somewhere in between the third dimension and the fourth dimension consciously. If they have some awareness of their internal thought processes, what drives them, what motivates them, and that there is something more, then we're bridging onto the fourth dimension. Once you get past that, you understand that there's universal consciousness, that everything is connected, and that you are part of it, if not all of it, then you start going up into the fifth dimension and beyond. So the key to the ego is that it helps us exist in this reality. We do live in a physical dimension, which we can categorize as the third dimension at a physical level. And so we require the ego to be able to function in a sense of normality here on this planet in these bodies. If we did not have the ego, we would not be able to function properly. It would be really difficult to get up in the morning and feel the need to shower ourselves and go to work and, make money and this kind of thing. It would not compute because that programming wouldn't be running. And so the ego, in a sense, is a good thing. We need it here. We've created it as a human consciousness because it allows us to be human. It allows us to experience life in this respect. And if we didn't have it, if we could transcend it all the time, then it would be a little bit more difficult to exist in this reality. You would essentially I believe, just ascend to a different dimension, a different level of consciousness. So in theory, you could potentially transform into the rainbow body, which some monks and very dedicated students of ascension of consciousness have done in the past. So quite literally, your body would dissolve and you would become just pure consciousness, pure energy. That's obviously the extreme other end of the spectrum. And so, to say that you can dissolve your ego doesn't mean all of a sudden your body is going to dissolve and you cease to exist as a human being on the planet Earth. I'm not saying that by any means. But what I am saying is that we do need the ego here in some respect, but it is important to make sure that the programming that the ego is running on is beneficial to our intentions and our conscious awareness, what we'd like to create in our lives, and the patterns that we're running karmically. So in that respect, yeah, we really do need the ego in the respect that we want to get rid of the negative things that are creating resistance or fear or running shadow programming, that kind of thing. Then yes, you would like to dissolve that, or at least I would if in that case. So the goal here is not to kill off the ego. It is simply to be aware of what it's running and then shift that programming. And eventually, when we do ascend and we break free from the veil, or we break through the veil, we experience ourselves as more connected to all things. And there's various different layers of that as well. And I'm sure that there's various different layers of other types of ego that exist in other dimensions. So maybe the fifth dimension has some layer of veil that acts like an ego, but not necessarily the same type as here at the third level. And now this is just speculation and personal theory, but it would make sense, would it not? That each level of consciousness would have a type of ego until you got to the point where the ego was completely dissolved and you understood and you simply were all things simultaneously, omniscient and experiencing life as the creator, the source of all things. So, something to think about, just something that I've been thinking about recently, and I wanted to share that with you guys. So let me know your thoughts, your ideas, your inner workings if you wish. And if not, then just feel free to go out and do some ego work for yourself. Do some discernment, some non-judgment of your thought processes, and dive deep into that subconscious realm to deprogram. If you need any assistance with that, please reach out to somebody that you trust in your community, whether that be practical or, what I'm saying, whether that be conventional therapy or non-conventional therapy. And if you feel called and you resonate with me, please reach out to me. All of my information for my services are in the description box below this video. Just hit the show more button and you will get a drop-down list of all of my services and offerings, how to contact me, how to send payment, and the email so that you can reach out to me and we can schedule an appointment for a session or a reading, whatever you feel will serve you best at this point in your journey. And I'd love to be able to support you with that. Also, I'm going to be doing a November, I'll say mid to end of November sale. So this is in honor of Black Friday, even though technically right now we're still way before Black Friday, but it's going to be 50% off all of my services. So you guys, this is a really great time to do some inner work and get a discounted price, so the investment won't be so daunting for you. I want to encourage you guys to really do this self-work, to invest in yourself, to be able to transform and to create positive change in your life, to stand in your power, to really be you. All right. I love you guys. Thank you so much for listening, for supporting the channel. If you like what I'm talking about here, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the bell notification to receive updates every time I post videos. I post tarot, monthly horoscopes, as well as spiritual chit chats like this and energy updates. All right, guys, we will see you next time. Bye.